The emergence of Godi Media is one of the major disasters as far as democracy in our country is concerned. Opposition is woefully inadequate in its function. These farm laws should not have been passed by the central government. Democracy appears to be in greater peril than it was 3 years ago. 40 lakh crore. But where is that money gone? They have not helped create demand in the economy.
We are going to fall into a debt trap in future. Is it the future generation is that trouble?
Yes. We will get into a huge debt trap. I have served under some outstanding leaders. BJP in those days was very, very, very different than it is today. माझी जो नाव डुबोए तो फिर कोई क्या करे? पहाड़ में पतझड़ हो जाए तो फिर कोई क्या करे?
Thank you so much, sir, for your time today on India Podcast for our listeners and viewers. It's a great pleasure to have someone who has served not just the political aspect in our country, but also served in various roles. We have seen you as an IAS, we have seen you as the Finance Minister, External Affairs Minister, someone who is the national spokesperson for BJP, the General Secretary for Janata Dal. So thank you so much for giving us your time today. It's utmost pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It is true that I have led a multifarious kind of life and done many things which most people would have taken many lives to do.
Yes,
But
totally.
in one life, I have combined so many roles. And at the end of all this, when I am now resting from my labor, I can look back with satisfaction to the kind of life that I have led.
So, sir, first question I want to begin asking is, after you left BJP, there was a statement you went on saying that I wanted to launch a nationwide campaign for the democracy, for the sake of democracy and take sannyas. From that moment till now, what has changed in the perspective of Mr. Yashwant Sinha?
Well, I said what you're quoting me to have been said in 2018.
Yes.
3 years have passed since then. The state of democracy in India at that time, April 2018. Then today, in March 2021, 3 years down the line, democracy appears to be in greater peril in our country than it was 3 years ago. And that is demonstrated by the fact that, all those things which sustain democracy in a country, and especially the institutions of democracy, which lend it strength, they stand compromised. And when I say institutions of democracy, I mean the Parliament of India, legislatures, very important, judiciary, the fourth state, that's the media,
Yes.
the NGOs. These are the pillars of democracy
Yes.
on which democracy is founded, and they lend strength to democracy. Now, if you look around, you'll find that almost all of it is seriously compromised today. And these institutions are not performing the role that they should be performing in our country today.
So when you talk about institution where we fall short of and you think is a threat to democracy has gone bad, let's bring you to the current situation of farmers' protest, where we all are standing to see a nationwide protest broke out. It was happening for a long time. You have commented on your views regarding that. But according to you, sir, what went wrong from the central government point of view and the state government as well? What led to this level of situation that it could not be handled in the right time or in the right way, despite both the sides coming up and justifying their capability and stand. Like BJP is very clear about how they think it's a progressive law. And we have had the farmers coming up and saying how they were not approached or considered for any decision even to make this bill pass.
Well, the genesis of what is happening in this country on the farmers' front lies in the manner in which the three farm laws were
Yes.
passed. First, these laws were promulgated as ordinances, as you are aware. Then they were rushed through the Lok Sabha. They were muscled through the Rajya Sabha. And you'll be shocked to hear if I told you that I read somewhere that in the UPA, 10 years of UPA, 71% of the bills which were introduced in Parliament
That's why a standing committee.
went to the standing committee, and now they're not going to the standing committee. And the last year and a half or 2 years, not a single bill has been referred to the standing committee. So standing committees of Parliament, whose main job is to examine legislations, are just there twiddling their thumb. So the farm bills were passed in complete violation of parliamentary procedures. And therefore, when Parliament failed in its duty, the street, as I have said in one of my tweets, the street has taken over. And now the irony of the situation is that in his meeting with the farmers' representatives, the agriculture minister is offering to examine the bills with them clause by clause.
Yes.
This is not to be discussed with interests like this. They have to be discussed clause by clause in the standing committee and in Parliament. So the first institution which this government has weakened in many invisible ways, I would say,
Yes.
is the Parliament of India. The second is the media. The third is the judiciary, which is not performing, I'm sorry to say, the role which was expected of it.
Yes.
It is not anymore the guardian of people's rights as it is supposed to be. So if these institutions of democracy don't live up to the role assigned to them, then the discontent is bound to spill over into the street. And that is what we are witnessing as far as farmers' agitation is concerned.
So, but if the state government, for that matter, Punjab government, could have represented the farmers' interest in a more proactive manner because negotiations were underway, do you think the patience broke out? Or as we know that this government, the current government at center, is trying to fast track all the reforms because they believe that it has long stood by for discussion but has not got implemented, be it GST, be it the farmers' new law bill, or be it demonetization. Whatever they tried to do was on a fast track mechanism to get it implemented, to find a solution. But we also see in farmers' protest case, the new law, farm law case, the Punjab government also did not manage it in the right manner, or how could it not handle it or stall the protest to go to Delhi when it could have been managed in a better way?
Well, the first point which I'd like to make is that these farm laws should not have been passed by the central government and the Parliament of India in the first instance.
Okay.
These are matters which should be left to the states.
States, yes.
Now, as far as I recall, the state government of Punjab has said that they are not going to implement these laws. But the laws are there. And the farmers are apprehensive that as long as the laws are there, they are going to be implemented. And it's not a question of the farmers of Punjab also. What will happen in Haryana, where there is a BJP government? What will happen to other states? So the farmers' discontent is a countrywide phenomenon.
Okay.
It may be true that farmers from Punjab and Haryana are there in larger numbers protesting.
But it is a nationwide protest.
Yeah, but it is a countrywide. It's a countrywide subject, embraces the whole country. And therefore, it is the central government which has to act. Acting by Punjab government alone will not suffice.
So, coming to the next important area is the economy of the country. You had commented on it again several times, but currently, if we look at the aspect of banking for that matter, where privatization is something we see a great encouragement coming from the government towards the privatization of PSU banks. And in the last few years, we have seen a greater change in it's called the bank tragedy years to say so, coming out of the burden of NPA, whether using NCLT, and because of COVID, everything fell flat. How are you looking at the banking space? Do you think it's on a recovery mode with some recoveries out there and privatization will help it or not?
My conviction is that banking is a subsidiary function
Okay.
to the functioning of the entire economy.
Okay.
If the entire economy functions well, then banking will also function well. You can't have the economy of the country in doldrums and still expect that the banks will be performing well. So now the government, of course, can hide behind COVID and say it because of the COVID that we have all these problems. But you're aware of the fact that 8 quarters preceding COVID, in March of last year, all those 8 quarters recorded sharp decline in the growth rate. So for 2 years before COVID, India was already recording a downward spiral as far as economic growth is concerned. And we came down from over 8% to around 4%. So there were problems in the economy, and it's my analysis of the economy that the basic problem was that of demand. Demand, for various reasons, got stifled, whether it's a bad implementation of GST or it's because of the demonetization,
yes,
or whatever. Demand in the economy suddenly shrunk. And that is what led to the decline in the growth rate of the economy. Then came COVID. Now the government is hiding behind COVID and saying all these problems are because of COVID, which is not true. And unless you go back to the basic issue of demand and do something to raise demand. The two special packages that the finance minister announced of 20 lakhs or more than 20 lakhs each, which means 40 lakh crore rupees were injected, according to these announcements, into the system. 40 lakh crore. But where is that money gone? They have not helped create demand in the economy. So whether it's the investment goods or consumption goods, which constitute the main demand in any economy, they are doing badly. Export demand has also not kept pace because of COVID globally. So on all counts, demand in the economy has gone down. And the government's efforts to shore up demand has not worked so far. That is the basic problem.
So somewhere the government has emphasized that they have focused on the inflation. They have tried to contain the inflation in the target number that they wanted, 4% plus minus 2% till now. And so that was in line to the GDP growth that they were trying to maintain. Also, there is a consideration that with the money being injected in the system, the immediate effect is not visible because of the back-to-back fallout from the low recovery stage of the economy to facing the COVID and the pandemic situation. According to you, how much time would it take now to get back to the normalized situation, and what are the immediate steps that could be looked at?
Well, it is anybody's guess, as far as how much time it will take for the economy to recover.
Yes.
But I don't think the government is going about it the right way. I was mentioning a little while ago to you that there are basically two kinds of demands in the economy. The third is export demand. One is demand for investment goods, and the second is demand for consumer goods. Now, you put money in people's pockets, the consumer goods demand will go up. But that will not necessarily lead to increase in demand for investment goods. The sequencing of demand has to be properly planned. And how should it be sequenced? You first make investment in infrastructure and related fields so that the demand for investment goods goes up. Suppose you start building more roads, more highways, then what happens? People will get employment.
Yes.
more people will be employed, they'll have money in their pockets. So when they have money in their pockets, they'll go and spend it in the market. So that will give a fillip to consumer demand. That is the sequence that we had tried. I mean, when we were working with Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee and the economy started picking up, it was not that it happened automatically or autonomously. We worked hard for it. And all those national highway programs and rural roads programs and housing programs and everything was meant to shore up the demand for investment goods and create employment opportunities. And when that happened, then consumer demand also went up and the economy started going up.
That's the basic economic equation, that you should focus on the investment demand creation before you go into the consumer demand creation. So you have always, not always, but recently to say, blamed the Modi government for using their own power or command on the communication. When I talk about media, now there's a term called Godi Media. So how much do you resonate with this term, which started coming up on the highlights and headlines about the farmers' protest, that there is something called Godi Media, which talks only what the government wants or Modi wants? How do you look at this perspective of media, which has changed in a very short time now?
The emergence of Godi Media is one of the major disasters as far as democracy in our country is concerned. Having said that, I would like to reiterate that the channels that I watched, social media, print media, in all these, I find that you have the Godi Media as far as the print media is concerned.
Yes.
You have the Godi channels, and you have the social media brigade affiliated to the ruling party, and they're bombarding people with wrong kind of information all the time. So where would people turn to? Where will they go for correct information? I will read a large number of newspapers, look at various channels, look at social media, but how many citizens of the country, in our country, will be looking at this? Most people will read just one newspaper, listen to one vernacular channel most of the time, and their mind will be impacted upon by what they are dishing out with it, which is untruth and pro-government propaganda, nothing more than that. I read some papers in the morning, and I am absolutely amazed at the manner in which they are taking the side of the government. In fact, I had remarked jokingly that at times when my blood pressure goes down, I watch one of these Godi channels, and then my blood pressure becomes normal again.
So how is it different from your era? You have been holding this position in your time. Did your interaction with media become so limited or restricted to the permission from the chairperson or the prime minister? How was it then?
No, it was not. Nobody tried to ever control the media. When I was finance minister, let me tell you that finance ministry has more investigative agencies than any other ministry in this country. Okay. I mean, look at the way ED is running riot.
ED is running now, yes.
Yeah. So you have all these agencies, but the thought that these agencies could be misused never even occurred to me. Now I am told representatives of the government call the chiefs of these investigating agencies and instruct them to go after this, that person, and that's how they are performing. This is absolutely, unwelcome in a democracy, but that's what's happening. Even print media. Why, for instance, will print media toe the government line? Basically for two reasons. One is they get ads from the government, which gives them sustenance, financial sustenance. And the second is they want to be on the right side of the government because they don't want to be raided by ED, income tax, CBI, NIA, and all the rest of the agencies. So it is extremely disconcerting to see that agencies of the government are being misused. I like to tell you here that as finance minister, I had abolished the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act.
Yes.
And FERA, which was a draconian piece of legislation and had been misused during the time of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, was then replaced by two other legislation. One was FEMA, Foreign Exchange Management Act, which was a civil offense. The criminal part was taken away. And the second was money laundering bill. Now, when I introduced money laundering bill in Parliament, many leading members of Parliament in those days warned me that we don't have any doubt about the intention of your government, but in future there might be a government which will misuse some of these provisions. And we sent it to the Select Committee of the Rajya Sabha, incorporated the suggestions which they had made, and tried to make it as gentle as possible. But look at the way the money laundering bill is being misused in this country today. So if a government is determined to use the laws and the agencies to implement those laws, misuse them in order to further their own interests or punish somebody, then this is a situation which will obtain.
Well, I think the government has taken more credit of unraveling many scams through these agencies in the recent years, be it the Vijay Mallya case, or be it the Nirav Modi case, or the Chanda Kochar, the big banking scam that is still under the trial. So do you think this misuse of power, or it is overusing power to somehow bring out the truth? Is it some way?
No, these are three famous names that you mentioned.
Yes.
But all three of them ran away. How did they run away from the country? Yes. It was not the UPA government which was in power then, or some other government. It was this government, and they managed to flee the country. So that's the first question which this government must answer before they can claim credit for having brought them to book. These are things which happen or can happen in any regime. Something bad will happen, some scandal will take place. This government is not above all that. Many things have happened. They have not come to the notice of the people because nobody has investigated, inquired into them. Even the media. Shifting from the economy for a moment. Let's take Pulwama, for instance. The massacre or the martyrdom of 40 of our CRPF Jawans in Pulwama. Was that ever investigated?
No.
And now an enterprising journalist of Frontline, Anando Bhakto, has come out with his findings on what happened in Pulwama and why was it allowed to happen. And nobody is bothered about it.
Do you think Congress turned out to be a weak opposition, or it is the majority numbers in the parliament which doesn't let it stand tall, or it is touted as being a weak opposition party?
Opposition is woefully inadequate in its functioning. I just mentioned to you how parliamentary procedures are being given a go-by by this government and how bills are not going to standing committees. Have you heard any opposition member raise it in parliament? Has anyone got up in parliament and said, you're not sending bills to the standing committees? Why aren't you doing it?
But they're talking off the parliament on media. We had Dr. Shashi Tharoor saying the same thing, that we don't have them going to the parliamentary committee at all. But
so I'm saying, I was in opposition once, and single-handedly, I stood up, raised an issue in Rajya Sabha, of which I was a member then. The presiding officer will not allow me to raise that issue, and I insisted on raising it because it was important, of great public interest. And we quarreled over it, and the House had to be adjourned, which means what? That if one member is determined to raise an issue and is not allowed to raise an issue, then it will lead to adjournment of House. Okay. Now we have so many members of opposition in both houses of Parliament. Why aren't they able to,
I think Derek O'Brien did try to disrupt the Parliament that moment, but it did not work in his favor. So
no, as Arun Jaitley said, late Arun Jaitley, the opposition has a right to disrupt. That's approved parliamentary tactics.
Sir, coming to one interesting question personally about you, your relation with your son, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, is very, very different because We know you guys don't discuss politics on dinner table. So what is the secret about this bonding, the father and son bonding that you have? Why I'm asking is because your belief in the ideology of BJP is now very different from his. So how do you get along well as father son in exchanging or influencing each other?
No, we don't try. As far as political thinking is concerned, we don't try to influence each other. I don't try to influence his thinking about what's happening at the moment. He is old enough to come to his own conclusions, and I have long experience, so I can come to my own conclusions. And it happens that we are coming to different sets of conclusions at this point of time. There was a time when we were on the same page, but we are not on the same page anymore. And I have my own very serious reasons for not being on the same page as him. I have never tried to impose my will on my children. They're all independent. Even when they were studying, I did not say you study this subject and don't study this, or choose this career, don't choose this career. They have acted independently all throughout their lives.
Wow.
And they're doing pretty much what they want to do now.
So I have someone from Kolkata, Mr. Rajiv Podar, who is economics teacher in Kolkata. And welcome to the show, Rajiv sir. You can have your question with Mr. Yashwant Sinha.
Hello, sir. We have all grown up watching your finance ministry or interviews and everything, your policies. I say it was one of the best. As you say, Samajwadi, the way you have put it is very nice, sir. I just wanted to ask you a small question, sir. In this budget, our finance minister said, I have spent, and I have spent. Do you agree with this philosophy? Do you really think that we can spend out of this misery by spending a lot of money? Do you think the government is to govern and not to gamble should be the philosophy? How can India fall into a debt trap because of all this?
Well, I would say that you have put the finger exactly where it should be. It is true that there are crises in the economy when you spend your way out of it.
Right.
And many people thought that this year was a year of COVID, and presenting a budget in COVID times would be very difficult. I thought presenting a budget in COVID times was the easiest thing done.
Okay.
Because nobody bothered about the figures in two ways. One is the efficacy of the figures which you mentioned, and two, even if those figures are correct, the huge deficit with the government's finances were running as a result of COVID. Nobody minded. And so she's right. She's spending. But what kind of expenditure? We must remember that government expenditure is basically divided in the government's budget into capital expenditure and revenue expenditure.
Of course.
Revenue expenditure, as we all know, is largely maintenance expenditure.
Recurring.
Capital expenditure is the one which is spent on new projects.
Right.
Now, she claims that she has set aside larger sums of money for capital expenditure.
Right.
But most of it, if you look at the deficit numbers, you will find that the revenue deficit has gone up exponentially. Which means what? Which means that the maintenance expenditure of the government has gone up.
Right.
Not the investment expenditure.
Right. Because that will investment is the best.
Unless the investment expenditure goes up, it will not make a difference. It will not make a difference. And this is exactly what I was pointing out a little while ago, that when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister and I was his Finance Minister, it was not for nothing that we started the National Highway projects or the Rural Roads projects or brought about a seminal shift in house construction. It was done because we wanted to give a fillip to investment. Now, after that, I find whether it's 10 years of UPA or 7 years of this government now, nobody has spent the kind of money which is needed on development of infrastructure in this country. And if you develop infrastructure, then you have a two-way advantage. One is that it reduces the transaction cost in the economy. So whatever business you are doing, I am doing, our cost will go down. We'll become more competitive globally and within the country. And the second, it is creates enormous employment opportunity.
The best thing, right.
It puts money in people's pockets.
As they say, the government is to govern and not to gamble. Just to make it happy and to spend money. Isn't it the future generation is that trouble is going to be risking us debt trap? We are going to fall into a debt trap in future. The fiscal debt.
Yes. We will get into a huge debt trap. And, I was once described by a senior member of parliament when I was finance minister as a fiscal fundamentalist. He said, you are a fiscal fundamentalist. Because I used to insist on balancing the budget and reducing the fiscal deficit. And I said, I admit to the charge, I am a fiscal fundamentalist because I don't want to create a burden for future generations to bear.
Right.
What we borrow today is a burden for future generations.
Absolutely.
So, do we have the right to do that? We don't.
That's such a prompt answer to the question. Thank you so much, Rajiv, sir. But, sir, before we let you skip out, we have this short segment with you, which is called the three-ways mantra. So there you're going to just specifically tell us the three-way mantra that you think. One is the top 3 steps needed to revive the economy at this point.
Top 3 steps are very clear. One is go for major infrastructure projects, as I said, which will create demand for investment goods and create employment. That will be a huge fillip to the industry. Second, please keep in mind the rural sector. How will rural demand? You build highways. That will not immediately give a fillip to rural demand.
Okay.
So take steps in order to raise rural demand in the rural areas by the rural people, which means do a lot more for agriculture, rural infrastructure, housing, etc. And the third is concentrate. These are difficult times, but you must concentrate on export demand also.
Okay.
Take proactive to promote your exports.
That was quite quick. Top 3 mantras for youngsters to make a right choice for their next prime minister. What should they keep in mind?
We are not yet a presidential democracy. We are a parliamentary democracy.
Yes.
Yeah, my advice will be you please look at the party, the kind of people there are in the party, the kind of programs that the party has. What is the outlook of the party generally? Because after all, let me tell you that this country has an ethos.
Yes.
And anyone who wants to change that ethos or do violence to that ethos should not be allowed to succeed.
Okay.
So that is something which young people must keep in mind.
So the last segment is the second chance. If Mr. Yashwant Sinha is given a second chance in his life, if you have to go back to time again, what is the profession you would have chosen for yourself? And also, if you come to the political party, which is the party you would have chosen for yourself?
Well, as far as the profession is concerned, let me tell you that there was a time in my life when I was young, when I was selected for the army.
Yes,
and it's my eternal regret that I did not join the army, instead got into the IAS. So left to myself, process and do something for the country. Which is a political party. Political parties, keep changing. There are many political parties today which were not there earlier. So it will depend on what the political situation is and which are the political parties in the fray there.
Sir, any regret or any changes you want to go back in time and make change to the political decision you have taken in terms of policy, if given a second chance?
Well, there would be, I'm quite sure there would be some political decisions which one would like to do it differently, given a chance. But, let me tell you from my own experience of being in politics and being especially a finance man, that the easiest thing to do is to be populist.
Okay.
You serve to people what the people want. So it is What they will want is gain and pleasure, not pain. But when you're running a country, then pain is an essential part of it. You have to take some very tough decisions
For
in
long
order
term.
to pave the way for a better future. And I have suffered in my own life, especially in the Ministry of Finance, because of some of the tough decisions that I took.
Yes.
Maybe I'll moderate them a bit, I don't know. But, the 2 years that I spent in the External Affairs Ministry, for instance, was comparatively peaceful years compared to the Ministry of Finance.
Finance.
In the Ministry of Finance, you take, you are faced with situations where you have to take all kinds of decisions, including tough decisions.
Totally. So, concluding this interesting session we had, we really enjoyed your company, your talks, your memories that you shared with us. One last moment which you would like to share, any quote, any such memory that you carry from your tenure, uh, any memory with Atal Bihari Vajpayee, or anything that you want to leave us with and our listeners with, which helps everyone follow a path, a good path in life ahead. That stays as your life mantra, to say so.
Well, I have served under some outstanding leaders. As an IAS officer, I was Principal Secretary to Karpuri Thakur, for instance,
Yes.
who was Chief Minister of Bihar. He was a remarkable person. He is long dead and gone, and not many people would remember him, but I would, because I worked with him closely. He was a remarkable person. And the second person with whom I worked immediately after entering politics was Chandrasekhar. Chandrasekhar
Yes.
was also a remarkable individual. And of course, then Advani and Mr. Vajpayee in the Bharatiya Janata Party with whom I worked. Now, even if we set aside Mr. Karpuri Thakur and Mr. Chandrasekhar for a while and just concentrate on Mr. Vajpayee and Mr. Advani, I would say that BJP in those days was very different than it is today. I used to be a spokesperson of the BJP when we were not in government. And I remember that every day in the party office, 5-6 of us will sit down and then decide what, as spokesperson, I would say to the media that afternoon. And it was a collective decision. Whoever was in town participated. And I just represented the party in the media interaction. I'm not sure whether that kind of discussion is taking place within the BJP today. It is, from all I learn, it's a one-way communication. Some people, one or two people speak, the others listen. They carry out orders, but it's not the army. It's a political
There is no
party.
discussion and a sit-down mechanism.
Yes.
So your favorite song, you can leave us with that. Any favorite thought or favorite song that let us listeners know from you, because
I'll tell you what. I was not even in India in those days. I was posted in Germany when the famous Hindi movie Amar Prem with Rajesh Khanna and Sharmila Tagore was released. And we had a friend in Germany, a person of Indian origin, who was a very good singer. And he sang those Amar Prem songs. And some of those songs are not only great melodies, their language, the wordings of the songs
very, very meaningful.
Very meaningful.
So 2 lines for us, please.
माझी जो नाव डुबोए, मझधार में अगर नाव डूब जाए तो समझ में बात आती है, लेकिन माझी ही नाव डुबोए तो फिर कोई क्या करे, पहाड़ में पतझड़ हो जाए तो फिर कोई क्या करे. तो ये some of the best Hindi songs were in that movie called Amar Prem.
And so relevant to today's situation.
Yeah.
So relevant. Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha, and it's utmost pleasure for us to have you with us. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.